I am not calling for the elimination of who was once a Zionist or once MAGA. In focusing on them, we're missing the violent structure and ideology to which they are wed. They must be the ones to divest from that ideology, an eliminationist, genocidal, expansionist project. We're just saying, no, you're a fascist. The responsibility is on you as a fascist to stand down from your fascism and join us, not the other way around.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
Visit sumudpod.com to subscribe and connect with us on social media. You can also support our work by contributing monthly on the Support Us page. Even $10 a month helps us continue amplifying Palestinian voices and those in solidarity. Thank you.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify the revolutionary Lara Sheehi. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to read a quick bio about you. Hopefully I don't mess it up. You're a clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst whose work explores how oppression and political power shape the human psyche. You've been intentional about challenging psychology's complicity with oppressive systems and reclaiming it for liberation, what you call liberatory psychoanalysis. Your new book, From the Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures, makes the case that psychoanalysis must move beyond the clinic and into collective struggle. I also want to note that you have the record for the number of F-bombs on the podcast. If you would like to get any F-bombs out of the way,
awesome.
Feel free to do so. But really, welcome. It's such a great honor. I actually talk about you all the time to my colleagues and the people within our community. I get very frustrated that they don't know who you are. So we're going to make sure they know who you are.
Shukran.
The irony is everybody else knows who you are, right? The government, ICE probably at this point knows who you are. So seriously, welcome to the podcast. You're one of my favorite guests, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for your generosity as always.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Palestinian-American attorney Ibrahim Awad. You may know him as the Karate Attorney. He's a huge member of our community and a big supporter of the podcast. Follow him at Karate Attorney on all social media outlets or visit his website, karateattorney.com. So just sort of a foundational piece. Mm-hmm. Talk about your story, who you are, how you got to where you are within this profession, just so the audience can understand.
Sure. Yeah, it's a journey, right? My name is Lara Sheehi, and I'm Lebanese Arab, and I think that's where it starts, and I think it's very important, not just because our field, and when I say our field, I say psychology, and I say that very intentionally, because if I'm reared in the field, I need to take responsibility for the field and the violence, which is part of what the book is about. But I think it starts there, not just because there are so few of us in the field that are out there, that are recognizable as Arab. I don't have to maybe tell the story of assimilation of Arabs in the context of the settler colony of the United States. But that was not my story. I was born and raised in Lebanon. I was born during the Civil War. I spent a lot of my childhood in a bomb shelter. And sometimes people, especially when I got here into the field, that's the story they wanted to hear. Everybody wants to hear the story of the traumatized Arab that comes to the West and gets saved by psychology. Yeah. That story fortifies me, and it fortifies the stories of our people and the centrality of the fight for Palestine and Palestinian liberation through Lebanon. And that's why I start there. So when I say I'm Lebanese Arab, I add Arab there because the commitment is to the larger Arab revolution and our full liberation, which for me runs through Jerusalem. And that's not a separate story from the story of what got me into psychology. So most people will listen to that and be like, what does this have to do with psychology? And that's a fair question. It's a fair question to people in psychology, even though it sometimes comes from a more racist place. I think it's a more fair question from people outside of psychology who are like, hey, we've seen what this field has done to our people, what it's done to people of the global South. Why are you in this field? And what I would say very simply is, I went to the American University of Beirut as an undergraduate, and I studied English literature. And that it was a place where I was taught how to read texts, how to understand contradictions, how to go beyond surface level understanding, critical thinking. And in English literature, psychoanalysis is alive and well. It's not in psychology for a bunch of reasons maybe we can get into. But I started to realize as I was coming into my political being, as I was starting to wear a hatta and understand what the responsibility of that is, as I was starting to really think through the impact of U.S. imperialism on our region, settler colonialism, Zionist aggression, gender, patriarchy, I was like, I need something more to understand how this stuff works and the ways in which power animates that in a very specific way. Because if you read psychology, it was super surface level. It was like A plus B equals C. And most of the time, that stuff didn't land for our people. Psychoanalysis had this way, this theory that felt expansive, that felt like it talked about desire, about identifications, about the contradictions in that. So theoretically, I was like, this is where I want to go, right? So I was lucky enough to find a place that was psychoanalytically oriented. It was at George Washington University, which was also my former employer. So I was also an alum.
Am I allowed to say boo?
Yeah, sure. We should all say boo to all the universities who don't support their faculty and their students in standing up against genocide. So I got here in 2006. I was evacuated from Lebanon. So folks might remember that there was an entire siege on Lebanon by the Zionist state. And I was evacuated because I happened to hold captive settler colonial citizenship to the state now known as Canada. So I was one of the lucky people who got to leave. And I knew I was already leaving. I just left in a different way than expected. So that's how I started graduate school. And that's why I think that backstory is really important, because I was already primed to be critical of a Eurocentric psychology, but as I was also deeply committed to it. So in many ways, I often joke that, like, you lost your biggest fan because you all couldn't get your shit together to not be racist, to not be anti-Arab, to not be anti-Palestinian, which made me go even deeper and even harder into the liberation and be like, there must be another story here. And to decide if there isn't, if this helping field, quote unquote, is not a field in which power can be dismantled, in which people can fight their oppressors, in which we can understand the ways in which our psyche is being used against us, it's not a field I wanted to be a part of. And like, that's what set me off on this journey.
And if I recall correctly, your experience with a therapist also helped shape your approach and your belief. And I think,
yes,
if I remember correctly, your therapist was attempting to brainwash you or gaslight you maybe a little bit.
Yeah, or maybe it was just completely misattuned. Like, I have no ill feelings on an individual level. What my experience with that therapist did when I first got to graduate school. So I was just like, I would be supremely hypocritical if I'm doing this work and then like not go to therapy myself, right? So I decided to go to therapy, and a dear trusted mentor suggested somebody. I went there, and it was fine. She was nice, right? It was great. But I just kept walking out of there feeling there's something missing that's not quite landing or connecting. And I felt she was constitutively misattuned to what I was saying. And I started to realize this is totally a racial thing. And on one level, we can just see like racism. And yes, that is in the field. It's baked into the field. But there was also something supremely American about it, like United States-based, how you look at our region, as in like broadly speaking, what is now called the Middle East. Where she kept going instead of where I needed to go was to be like, you know, she wanted to focus on my being evacuated. Again, a fair thing for a therapist to do. But I started to be really interested in what happens when someone's sitting across from you and telling you, that's actually not where I need to go. There were so many reasons why I didn't need to go there. I understood politically why I was evacuated. I understood who the aggressor was. I understood that this was not a new story. I understood that Zionism had built this condition in which this could happen. And I certainly understood that there were people that had to stay in Lebanon. And I understood that there were people who took the brunt of that, primarily the people from the South. I was not one of those people. I had a citizenship that would evacuate me. So all of that together created a buffer for me psychologically. I wasn't feeling it in the same way. That doesn't mean I wasn't sad. That didn't mean I wasn't like thinking about how it affected me. That doesn't mean that it didn't, make me think about the ways it was going to imprint on me going forward. But like what I needed to focus on was the racism I was feeling every single day in the classroom, in the texts we were reading, in the fact that for the first time in my life, I was having to navigate real-time Zionists, not just like on TV and bombs dropping on me. It was like, oh, I'm in a classroom with settlers from settlements from the state of Israel. That's a real everyday struggle that I was trying to make meaning out of. How do I navigate? How do I deal with the contradictions inside of me of being in the United States when I knew the United States was helping Israel bomb Lebanon and aggress upon the rest of our region? Like, that's the texture I wanted to go to. And she just couldn't go there with me,
So I just want to reiterate for our audience, if they want to see your full story, your original story on the previous podcast, to watch that. That's your whole life story, I think, in my opinion, it was brilliant. Yes. And you did so well on that. So thank you. And before we talk about your book and we kind of dive into that, this is a comment/question.
Okay.
How does it feel? And do you realize that you are one of the most feared women by the Zionists across the world? I mean, they are scared of you. How does that feel? Do you recognize that? And even maybe you can explain why they're scared of you.
Yeah. Well, I don't think about myself that way. However, I do joke, and this is an ongoing meme about like living rent-free in Zionists' heads. And they remind me of that all the time, which is kind of absurd. But I think this is where my focus on not just individualizing something, but think structurally helps me understand that, right? So I think one of the things about Zionism as an ideology is that it is an eliminationist ideology. It is intent on full erasure and elimination, not just of indigenous people in Palestine, on the land of Palestine, but anybody who dares remember that there is a thing as Palestine from the river to the sea.
Yep.
Inhabited by Palestinians from the river to the sea. So if I think about it like that, I'm like, oh, it extends to wanting to eliminate, erase, eject, excise, every other word you want to say of anyone who refuses to bend away from that. If there's anything I'm unbending. And I'm unbending, and I think in the book I talk about psychic militancy, because I do think it demands a militancy of us, an unbending position to hold the line, to say any movement, to soften ourselves, to both sides it, to dehistoricize it, is normalization. And that's one thing I am never going to be involved in. I think that's part of it. I really do. Like, some of the attacks on me have been primarily around this. And it's a shifting goalpost. It's sort of like anti-Semitism, of course, which is an ever-expanding thing that's lost its actual value and is an abomination, actually, to real anti-Semitism that we see. So that's one thing. That's like, it's a joke at this point. But the moving goalposts are like, she's uniquely positioned to bring down our entire field. I wish I were making this up. These are actual words people say. Yeah. The blood, of our profession is on your hands. She's blown up entire organizations from the inside. We let her in and she blew it up. You don't even have to try, you don't have to be a psychoanalyst to be like, whoa, there's a lot going on here in terms of racism, but also like the unique power that I have as this sleeper cell, which is so Islamophobic and Arabophobic in its,
You're not a sleeper cell, you're in your face.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, really, guys? I'm not over here sleeping. I'm just out here, telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other piece of it, is that so many of these systems of power want us to bend reality. And I think that we get conscripted into that. And I have tried my best to be aligned in an integrity that demands that I can't do that. Yeah. And it's bigger than me. I'm committed to a cause. I always say that. I'm like, the miscalculation that fascists make, that we're seeing in the streets, by the way, and like in Minneapolis, and also that Zionists make, is that somehow this is a side gig for us. Like, we're just here, rah, rah, Palestine, and not committed to a larger cause that has like real material reality. And that includes risks. Obviously it does, because we're coming up against an entire infrastructure of power. So how is it like to be fair? I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that they just constantly come at me. And like I was saying, the shifting thing, like then it became that I say fuck too much, which apparently I do.
That's number one.
That's number one. And then, that I'm going to harm students, that I can't teach Jewish students, and so on and so forth. It's like every day's a new thing.
Yeah. So getting into your book, so I'll admit to you now, I think I texted you, I ate the book up, but I actually did it in 2 days. It was a powerful book.
Wow, thank
Seriously.
you.
I think that this is going to be such a game changer. And I don't know if I'm necessarily an expert in this field, obviously, but it really shifted my thinking and my approach down to when I have certain feelings or somebody makes me feel less than or makes me question myself, as I start writing it down. Nope. Yep. This is the bullshit that they try to pull on us. So with that, you open the book about you being on a panel.
Yes.
And you having this Zionist guy trying to intimidate you and scare you. Most people would have melted at that very moment. Most people would have retreated, which many people in the audience, I believe, did. Yes. You didn't. You took notes.
Yes.
You reminded yourself, I think in your book, you call it affirmations, generally speaking, right? You were able to do that on the spot. Can you just share a little bit about that story and how you had the presence of mind to do that?
Sure. First of all, I can't tell you how much it means to me that you have engaged it with the book in this way. And I think it's precisely because you're not a quote unquote expert. Like, this is a book for comrades. This is a book for all of us who are engaged. That's why I talk about despecializing psychoanalysis. Yep. I'm just like, fine. If I had to be subjected to this, I'll at least turn around and be like, let's use it, folks. Like, these are the theories. These are the things that are happening. Let's turn it around and use it for our struggle. I start off the book by saying I didn't have the words for it then, that's what I was starting to hone. I was starting to realize, and maybe, your question earlier about therapy and coming to the United States, like I realized I had all these experiences and I was trying so hard to make sense of them, to organize them, to track patterns, to be like, this can't be an individual thing. Like, what I'm experiencing, that's supremely narcissistic. It can't just be about me.
Right.
Especially if I was like, we know about structural racism, we know about structural sexism. Why wouldn't this also follow that logic? So to put us in that scene that you're talking about, in 2017, I was at a panel, this large conference that happens every year as part of the American Psychological Association. It's one of the divisions of that I later became the president of. But at that time, I was not. I was just on a panel called...
I think I'm a member of APA. Okay. Something, so
all right. Yeah. Okay. We can talk about that decision afterwards.
Membership canceled.
Yeah.
Right.
So that panel was called Talking About Palestine and Psychoanalysis. That's it. Right? So you want a more like neutral statement. We're not even like taking a position. We're just talking. Now, of course, those of us who were on the panel all had a position. And the position was about talking about settler colonialism and the ways in which psychoanalysis was involved in the project of erasure of Palestine. Right. One thing to say is that up until that point, there hadn't been a lot of explicitly Palestine-based content in these conferences. And it's akin to a lot of organizations we've seen. Like over the last decade or more, we've seen more and more people be like, hey, if we talk about racism, we should be talking about Palestine. If we talk about, anti-capitalism, we should be talking about Palestine. But at that time, it was like still emerging, especially in psychoanalysis. So we start the panel, and I'm the only woman and the only Arab on the panel, which factors into this, and I think factors into this in terms of like the Zionist campaigns against people too, about we see who they target.
Right.
It was standing room only, which gave us a sense of like, oh, people want to hear. I don't know where everybody's position is on this, but if nothing else, they see the word Palestine and they're just like, eyebrow up. All right, let's go see what's happening. So it was packed. People were standing, sitting down. And then a little into the panel, I look up and I see a man walk in, a white man walk in and block the doorway. And he has an Israeli flag t-shirt and locks eyes with me and starts to flex his muscles. And I'm just like, oh boy, I know the likes of you. And I think that's where it starts, right? Because it was already a political project. When you say like, how did you have, I can't remember the exact words, but how do you have the wherewithal in the moment to do this rather than collapse? Is that I was not under the impression that this space was not a politicized space. I think many people in psychology and in other professions sometimes even unconsciously forget that every space we're in is saturated by politics. So when I clocked him, I was just like, all right, I know what this is related to. Like there was nowhere in my mind where I was like, oh, maybe he's just here to present a different position. Yeah. He's taking up the Zionist position. We're taking up the Palestinian. But these mental gymnastics were nowhere there. I'm like, I know what you're here for. And then, of course, his physical stance gave it away entirely. So he's carrying a brown bag with him. So I'm immediately thinking, we're in the United States. This guy might have a gun. So I clocked that. I'm like, there's a reality to that. And also, whoa, Lara, pay attention to where your mind went immediately. So there's something here to pay attention to, something to be alert about. And then, of course, he warriors up with a kufiye. That's not a kufiye, but has Israeli flags all over it. So I was like, all right, we got this. What I immediately did, I think this comes from being politically engaged, is I had a work phone with me, my personal phone and work phone. My work phone has more space on it. So I pulled out my work phone and I was like, I'm getting ready to videotape this guy because I know there's going to be, we know how Zionists work. If they are non-cowardly enough to show up to spaces, it's because they're networked enough and feel empowered enough to do that. And I knew this guy was going to do something. So like clockwork, he starts intervening, right? He interrupts. There's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinians. This is a political agenda. And so the video I took is of me being like, yeah, like, thank you for making our point for us, right? Yeah. But when he walked in, to your point, I registered everything I was feeling.
Did he really start flexing?
Oh, yeah. He was flexing his muscles.
Very MAGA-like. Yeah.
Totally. Cracking his knuckles, locking eyes right on. He wasn't looking at anybody else. Yeah. He was just like, you. This is about you. And that's the thing. It was just like, it wasn't like, hey, who's behind me? It's like, no, you're looking at the Arab woman with the kufi. And because this is the relational process you're trying to pull me into. And that relational process has a political history. And you know what that political history is. There's no innocence here, right? So I registered fear. And that's the thing I want to tell people. It's like, it's not like these affect states don't exist. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I registered it. And so I wrote to myself, don't let him colonize your mind. Like, this is part of a larger, and I just kept writing myself. And then I was looking around. Nobody had noticed him. That was the weirdest part. I was like, does anybody feel this like completely aggressive, masculine and masculinist energy emanating? I mean, that's what made me look up. I was like taking notes because my, panelists were talking, and I looked up because I was like, dude, there's a disturbance in the force. Yeah. And I look up and there he is, right? So, but I had to do that first. I had to center myself. And in centering myself, I had to say, part of the Zionist project is to derail us from our focus on material reality and from Palestine. And that's what he's here to do. Everybody else in the room either were like, the video shows them all sort of heads down when he's screaming, very worried, a lot of sort of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Followed up by theorizing, like, oh, this is a displacement, or like using their theory. And that's the second piece that I started to be like, what is happening here? That in real-time aggression, there's a real human, a man, standing there in an Israeli flag. Like, this is not, he's not in costume, folks. He's like literally the instantiation of the Zionist state standing right in front of you. And you still reach to your theory. That was fascinating to me. And that's what I said. I made an intervention. I was just like, I appreciate what you all are trying to do, but this comes from a long Zionist playbook. There's a disruption happening in real time. And all you can do is theorize about it. It's happening right now. And that's the sort of crux of it all.
Did anybody snap out at that moment or?
Not really. I think there were a couple people who tried to make interventions. One of my panelists, a dear friend of mine, was just like, yes, you and Golda Meir, we know this story, right? Which sometimes works, but that didn't cut to the heart of what was happening. It ridiculed him. It put him in a long line of Zionists who used this same tactic. But for the people involved, it didn't read the process. Like, why this room? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it like this? That was what was happening. And then at the end, I say this in the opening scene, is a senior colleague said, you know, sometimes the group has to make the decision to eject an aggressor. But like, nobody ejected him.
Yeah, did I read it right? Where some people were just basically saying, well, we have to give him that space. He has to be. How does that work? I mean, he's exuding hate and negativity and he's clearly attacking you.
Yeah.
We have to give him space for that?
Well, I think we see versions of this, right? I think people are so steeped into this, like, what I would call rotten liberal ideas about, you know, the sensibility of all ideas, that there needs to be space. And that is not an innocent position. That's a way that people show themselves to be generous. Like, we go high, right? Like, no, there are some positions that are not of the same merit. Those positions he was taking are not opinions that deserve space to be talked about. Those are genocidal positions. He was saying there's no such thing as Palestinians.
Yeah.
And that's the piece. And I think people are so mired into that, thinking that more space for dialogue will create more opportunities for learning. And it's like, can we be critical about where the starting point of that is? Because his starting point is not dialogue, but you're asking us to start with dialogue. His starting point is that none of us exist.
Yeah.
Right? And but yeah, people tried to like make the case. And I just kept being like, no, there is no space for this.
Right. So the other component that I found fascinating, which I wasn't really aware of, it was Edward Bernays.
Yes.
Everything that he's done, which I'd like you to share. Again, as I mentioned to you, I'm going to act like a student here and simplify this for me. The MK Cultura project, the Cointelepro project, all of these projects were going on and really no one was aware.
Yes.
And it became weaponized. It was as devastating as a bomb, essentially.
Absolutely.
Can you walk through that a little bit?
Absolutely, yes. I like that you started there, as devastating as a bomb, because those are the actual words that military psychologists and the architects, all the projects that you listed out, are considered part of a large project of what we would call psychological operations, PSYOPs, right? Mm-hmm. Casually speaking, a lot of times we hear PSYOPs this. That is part of what we're talking about. They are many things, but these ones that you are listing out are like the heyday ones, the most talked about ones, the most vicious ones, the most violent ones. The United States actually, so one of the things I do is I have a chapter about psychological operations, which I think is like the most nerdy chapter. But I think people need to know this, because one of the things that, you know, in learning from colleagues and comrades like Dylan Rodriguez or Sammy Burton or my dear comrade Jared Ware, is that PSYOPs manuals or like counterinsurgency manuals are available on the internet for people. Like the military will just put it out and you can read it. They don't tell you who they use it against. But one of the important things is, while people don't know about it, I think many people do, like leftists, organizers will know about it because they're on the receiving end of it. So the Black Panther Party were very prolific in warning people and telling people. The American Indian movement were very prolific about telling people about COINTELPRO, right? About how this project of spying on what were considered leftist extremists and messing with them and murdering them, like just straight out murdering them, right? So Fred Hampton gets murdered in Chicago because there's an infiltrator. All of these stories are part of that project. But in like the 1950s, the United States was still not caught up, let's say, on PSYOPs. The two states that were, which I put in the book, are the United Kingdom and the state now known as Israel. And so the big aha moment for me, which blew my mind, one of the most famous psychologists out there that you will learn in Psychology 101, alongside Freud, right? But Freud is disparaged, and this guy, B.F. Skinner, who's like the behavioralist progenitor, everybody's like, oh, we love B.F. Skinner. We love the behaviorist so much, which we could talk about why, but...
In organizations too, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. So
exactly. Exactly. He's central to it, right? Yep. Conditioning, behavioral modification, all these sorts of things come from that lineage. Yep. And in reading about this, in the 1950s, when the United States is starting to make these psychological operations projects, when they turn their focus and say, we need to move away from actual warfare, what you just said, into psychological warfare, which is worse than a bomb, because now we're inside people's minds, right? B.F. Skinner sends one of his people. He has a contract with the Department of Defense, which is never talked about, and sends one of his people to the state now known as Israel to track Palestinians and be a surveillance, machine, part of the surveillance machinery. So I immediately got into, there's a larger project happening here where these settler states are sharing information about how you control populations, and not just like brainwashing control, but manipulate affect, propaganda, messaging, make people feel afraid so they discipline themselves. We can see how this translates into borders, into checkpoints, into literal fear, into violence, right? But Edward Bernays started this in the 1920s. Talking about propaganda. Edward Bernays, for people, is none other than Sigmund Freud's nephew. And so he uses the legitimacy that's bestowed upon him by Freud, like just being like, here's my card, here's my Freud card, right? I come from this family, listen to me, but really excavates his uncle's theory and writes book upon book upon book about propaganda. And he's most known for being involved in the overthrow of leftist Latin American governments, including in Guatemala, and in really figuring out how you get into the minds of people who support leftist movements, and especially militants. Because one of the things Bernays found out, and then later on MK Ultra and COINTELPRO, and all these counterinsurgency manuals will say straight up, militants, meaning the most politically committed of people on the ground, whether they are actually fighting or politically committed ideologically, are impossible to change. They don't change their mind because they're committed to a cause. So what do? And Edward Bernays comes along and goes, we have this thing called the psyche, and we have all these mechanics of propaganda. So make everybody else hate them. Lie, spread rumors, make them look like they're villains, make them look like they're hurting their people.
So really quick, is this guy just sick? Is he Zionist? Or, I mean, I don't know if we can answer that here, but what's his deal?
I think he's a lot of these things. These people believe in their project. They believe in the ideology of American empire. They truly believe it. And so they're using everything at their hands to say, let's make our presence known. And this is better. We see a version of this of like national security, right? So with the aggression on Venezuela, what is the language that's being used? It's about United States, national security and all this. It's the same stuff over and over. You can track it, right? But it starts there. And he's just like, here's everything in our hands. It's sort of like if we were akin to marketing nowadays, where like people who market things use psychology down to where they place things on a shelf when kids come into a Target, that like toys are on the bottom so that kids are looking at it. We can look and be like, whoa, that's fucked up. Like you're manipulating something here. But that comes from a long line of psychologists and psychoanalysts who were aware that we could manipulate the environment and induce an action, especially if people weren't aware that that was happening. And that was Edward Bernays' point, was propaganda also has to hide seamlessly. I think we're seeing a version of this now. Is like people are just like, I don't trust anything anymore. And Gaza, I think, did that, really blew everything out of the water, where people are now like, oh my God, I see the mechanics of this. But for so long it wasn't. The last thing I'll say about this is all of these projects animate and play on infrastructure that's already there, like racism. So when you have COINTELPRO going after the Black Panther Party, it uses racism that's already present in the context of the United States and lets it do the work. So when you start blasting photos of armed Black men, doesn't matter that it's legal to be armed, doesn't matter that these people are protecting their communities, setting up free breakfasts, setting up clinics, saying, we're doing this because you all don't take care of us, so we're taking care of our people. When you start using anti-communist language, and in the context of the United States, communism is the big bad wolf, that does the work for you. Then people are like not recognizing, oh, I'm being pulled into, demonizing these people. And let me question, who's telling me to do this and why now? You're just like, oh yeah, Black people, Black men especially, I'm scared. Now they have guns, I'm even more scared. Or they're communists, they're coming here to take our freedoms. The language is so important. Yeah. Right? That's what starts to happen.
So Skinner, I have to admit, I'm a bit embarrassed because when I was reading your material, I didn't realize, because we teach about him all the time through an organization development lens or through an HR lens or change management lens, whatever it may be. Yeah. And we highlight his work and we put him on this pedestal. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I had no idea. It really is entrenched in all of our literature or work. And it's just very scary.
Yeah, you're not an idiot. That's the thing. It's meant to hide seamlessly so that it becomes common sense. And if you're not teaching Skinner, somebody's going to look at you and say, you're an idiot for not teaching Skinner. That's when people say that. That's the point, is these things become so normalized and become part of the larger texture of the world that they hide in plain sight and we don't question them. Right? Yeah. And I think that's the piece where in the book, I really talk about a daily political practice of disrupting what seems normative to us and an understanding that it fits into a larger framework that is meant to shape the way, not only the way we see the world, but the way we interact with others internally, and most importantly, the way we commit to being sure that a different type of world and our liberation is possible.
Yeah. But it was a moment of humility for me too, to be honest, because through a DE&I lens, diversity, equity, inclusion lens, we always encourage people to challenge their mental models, their assumptions. If there are any phrases that people say that's ubiquitous, you should maybe look into what those phrases actually mean or where they came from. And here I am, I'm telling people to do that, and I'm not doing that myself for some of these individuals that we're learning about or teaching about.
Yes. Yeah. I love that example because even within these frameworks, which I have a lot to say about, the parameters are already set for us. Yeah. What we're allowed to question and how far we go are already set for us. That's why Palestine breaks it. Like DEI broke and has always broken on Palestine. So there's also a lack of truth in the building of the parameters, and we're not supposed to see that. And we're not supposed to name that. That was part of what I was doing. I realized going backwards what I did when I came into the States, in many ways just by mere presence, just like, oh, I'm not from here. And like that disrupts something, right? Because I'm not socialized in this way. But also by refusing to let Palestine go to the wayside and not fit into the frame. I was like, it belongs everywhere. Just like in that panel, in that conference, Palestine belongs everywhere because there's a material reality to Palestine. But in these frameworks that you're talking about, you reach to Skinner because that is an okay place to go.
But you understand, now I have to go like question my education, generally speaking.
Good.
Right? I mean, is that the idea? Is that what you're, yeah.
Of course.
Should we go back to score your school? Should you start a university for us?
No. And can I just say something? It's not meant to be nihilistic. I don't want to go to a place of like, what's the point of anything? Because everything's, no, there is a point to something.
Yeah.
And that's our political struggle. And it's our political struggle in naming and creating the world that we want and the world in which the condition where a genocide can unfold and keep on going can't happen. There's nothing nihilistic about that, right? But in the world of the B.F. Skinners of the world and the DEI that doesn't include Palestine and that Zionism is a racial category now, like that's the world of reality bending. That's the world we need to continue pushing up against and dismantling and denormalizing.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you ever watch the movie Get Out?
Yes.
When I was reading the book, I felt like I was that character, Jordan Peele's Get Out, of that, like being brainwashed and looking around and seeing people's blank reactions to what's happening in Palestine. I don't know if that's the greatest, comparison, but that's what I felt like as I was reading it.
One. Yeah.
Pretty scary.
Yeah, because there's a trapped, like that's the whole point, right? There's a trapped feeling and there's a foreclosure. I think, when you associate to that movie, it's sort of like, this is what the world is populated by. Yep. And I see what's happening, but like, where do I turn to?
Right.
Who do I turn to? And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot more that populates the world, but what we attune to is constructed by these larger oppressive forces. And like, we gotta, punch through that shit.
Yeah. That's a great transition to Frantz Fanon.
Yes.
You talk about him in great detail within the book. For the audience, you want to give a little bit of background about him and why he influenced a lot of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Frantz Fanon was a revolutionary Black psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who was from Martinique and fought for Algerian liberation with the FLN. And for a long time, Frantz Fanon, and still to this day, is taught through like anti-colonial studies or Black studies where he thoroughly belongs, but was entirely written out of the canon of psychoanalysis and psychology. Not by chance, I don't think, because every revolutionary, and there were many, right? And there are many, I want to say, even contemporary people.
Such as yourself.
Thank you. Are written out of the story, right? Because psychology is by and large a practice of disciplining people into normativity. And so if you have these like radical figures hanging out, they kind of put a wrinkle in things. He was one of those wrinkles. And he was a comrade through and through. And I think his practice, his psychoanalytic practice, was central to his commitment to revolution because he was interested in oppression. He was interested in the ways that colonialism affected people. He was interested in the ways and experimenting with a type of practice that we do that didn't give up one for the other. So psychology, by and large, will tell you psychology happens within the clinic walls. That's why the book is called From the Clinic to the Streets.
Right.
And Fanon's like, fuck that shit. Number 2.
Three.
Oh,
yeah.
Was it 3? Oh my gosh. I didn't even... He was like, no, how do we imagine that the things that cause psychic suffering exist only within the space of the clinic? We have to be just as attentive to everything happening in the world. And that doesn't mean just family, because I think psychology is good at also looking at like family, but that just reinscribes an individual. He was like, no, there's this whole thing called colonialism, in that case, French colonialism, and racism, which he experienced firsthand as a Black man. And he's like, these are the things we need to look at. And our commitment, our ethical imperative as clinicians is to, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says to sort of dismantle all the incarcerative conditions that might oppress somebody. And that's our project. And he spent his life, which was short-lived. It's a story. He died in his 30s in CIA custody in Maryland from leukemia, which is the story of Black men dying young. Right? It's in one ways like people want to be like, oh, he was in CIA custody. Yeah, we should think about that, but we don't know enough. But what I do know is that racism kills people early, and it's not a new story. But that's his legacy. And so I was introduced to Fanon in the midst of being told that everything of my being, that all my ideas about liberation, that my commitment to Palestine and to Lebanon and to liberating oppressed peoples was a political project and didn't belong in psychology. And then I read Fanon and I was like, I remember picking up Wretched of the Earth and just being mind blown, thinking he's talking to me today, but he's writing in the 1950s about this. And then, of course, I just like ate up everything he wrote. But he gives us what I call like a psychological grammar from the global South. And he's unbending. Talk about unbending. He does not take a breath. I have the image of reading him and hearing his voice, which obviously I'm just reading, but like without so much as taking a breath and just saying, my job is to list out the mechanics of colonialism and all the violence that comes with it. And I need to keep telling this story because it can easily be lost. And the only way to dismantle this is to tell the truth over and over and over again about the project of colonialism. And I was just like, I'm home.
Yeah.
I'm home.
So don't walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
Say what you got to say. Fight for your rights.
Yeah.
I think your book leaves space, obviously, for the emotion and reflection.
Yeah.
Right? But at the end of the day, you sort of have to roll up your sleeves.
Yes.
And get the job done.
Yes.
Stand up, right?
Yes. Yeah, because, I mean, this is where Fanon teaches us. It's like, because this is reality.
Yeah.
If we soften ourselves, if we look away from it, if we, think there's any other version of negotiating with the oppressor, they're going to keep doing what they're doing because colonialism is a structure that is hell-bent. He says, and this is one of the quotes that I have in the book, is that it's not just content with like messing with your current day. It wants to reach into your past and reconfigure your future.
Like Palestine doesn't exist or never existed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that in the future, Palestine doesn't even exist. Like, this is what we're being told every day. Gaza is done. Palestinians are done. Think about the messaging we get. And Fanon stops us in our track and goes, this is part of the machinery of colonialism and power. It wants to make you believe you have nowhere else to go. And the only place to go is where the colonizer takes you. And that's part of what I'm trying to do in the book, is being like, hold up. There are so many possibilities, even if we don't know them yet. The point is not to know everything right now. I think we get caught up in that too. And we get actually tasked with that impossibility. It's an unfair one where people are like, okay, well, what do you want to do with Palestine then? And I'm just like, I don't know. That's what we're trying to fight for, right? Like, there's a lot of possibilities. What I do know is that Palestine is not done. The history of our region is not done. And that Palestinians are not going to just be erased. That's what I know for sure. That's what Fanon teaches us, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue to psychic intrusion.
Yes.
Could you, in everyday people language, explain? Because I experience it on a daily basis, obviously with the podcast and feedback we get and a lot of the hate mail or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Can you just explain to the audience what that really means?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And I hope I'm talking in language.
You are. No, that's great. I'm understanding it. That's a good sign.
Good. No, I appreciate it. Psychic intrusion, so probably most simply speaking, are all the ways in which systems of power, whatever they may be, try to find themselves into our mind in a way that, like I was saying before, seamlessly. They can look very crude, like propaganda. Like, for example, the state now known as Israel is just defending itself. That's a psychic intrusion. Psychic intrusions happen all the time, and they have to happen repetitively for them to take hold. That's a crude one. But other psychic intrusions are also ways in which we might find ourselves confused about things we know to be true. I started to really coalesce this idea when people would come up to me over and over again over the past 2.5 years and just be like, I feel like I'm going crazy, even though I know what's happening.
Or weird, or like we're the weird ones.
Yes.
Or we're conspiracy theorists.
Or unreasonable.
Yeah.
Or asking for too much.
Yep.
Or, being, delusional. or being
obsessive even.
utopian, obsessive. Those are all examples of psychic intrusions. Now, kind of like what I said before, we live in a world of psychic intrusions. Capitalism is a psychic intrusion, right? That basically tells you there are no other versions of the world. And this suffering that we see and the discrepancy of classes and some people not being able to eat and migrants being kidnapped, that's the only version of the world we can live in. Those are psychic intrusions. So it's anything that like makes its way into our mind with the intent of reconfiguring how we feel and think about ourselves in the world internally. Because that creates an action within us, which might be despair. It might be just giving up. It might be forgetting that an intrusion is actually happening. All those sorts of things.
Or not boycotting because what's the difference?
Exactly.
What's the big deal?
Exactly. Exactly. Psychic intrusions normalize the world as is instead of commit us to a constant disruption and a questioning and a belief that actually other things can emerge from this, just like October 7th taught us.
You've talked about patients who have spoken to you.
Yes.
I feel like I'm going crazy.
Yes.
I'm watching this on my phone.
Yes.
But people are telling me it's not what I'm seeing. And so how do you sort of help them reconcile those thoughts and feelings?
Yeah. Well, part of it is what I started to notice is that having the space to articulate that without the experience I had with my therapist, where I just imagine, like, if I were saying that she might move off course and be like, oh, you're talking about this other thing. Or maybe just not take it up. Let me talk, but like not pay attention to it and then move on to the next thing. I've heard so many stories of that too. People who'll come to me and be like, my previous therapist did this, or she'd say I'm over-intellectualizing, or prescribe me not looking at the genocide, or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So one thing is creating the space in which articulating these truths of what we're experiencing is possible. So when my patients would come in and be like, I feel like I'm going crazy, it's not to rush in and be like, you're not, even though they're not.
Yeah.
It's to be like, whoa, let's pay attention to like, how is it that you're telling me, you know exactly what's happening. You feel it, right? You watch it, you follow it. You have family there, you have friends there, and yet you still feel crazy. What's going on here? It's an invitation for us to make meaning out of that process. I could get lost in the content and the actual words that were being said.
Yeah.
But that derails us. Then we're like arguing about words and about reality when like we know the reality. That's our starting point. Right. I don't need the patient to prove to me what reality is because I know that psychic intrusions happen. I know what is happening on a propagandistic level. That's our departure point. From there, we can be like, what are all the variables that come together that make it hard for you to hold on to the fact that you're not the one that's crazy?
Yep.
You know?
So I think what was empowering about your book, I found myself moving from helplessness to action, to empowerment, right? Like, no, I may be feeling this way, but let me put it down on paper. Let me talk about it. Let me walk through it. Let me talk to colleagues maybe who are in the same, right? So I think you're encouraging us because many of us, and you know this better than anybody, just sort of go in the back room, lock the door, cry themselves asleep.
Yes.
Or I know I have many cases of individuals with severe depression with what they're seeing too, not knowing how to reconcile what they're dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing you presented, again, I loved your book so much because you gave me words I've never really heard of, but the idea or the concept of reality bending and psychic grammar.
Yeah.
Can you break that down?
Yes.
Professor or Dr. Sheehi?
So reality bending, you know, Stephen and I, my partner, wrote this book called Psychoanalysis Under Occupation, Practicing Resistance in Palestine. And that's really where we go head into settler colonial reality bending, meaning what? That for a system like settler colonialism to exist, whether that's in the Zionist entity or in the context of the settler colony of the United States, it conscripts us, pulls us into, seduces us into everyday moments of bending what is actually in front of us. So, for example, you and I are in Washington, D.C. We can go around thinking this is Washington, D.C. and forget that this is stolen land, right? That is not a platitude. That's not just like, oh, you're just being like woke saying this. It's like, no. Our ability to dissociate from that reality on a day-to-day basis is what systems of power rely on so that we can forge a new reality. That's reality bending. So it's one of these things where I was really paying attention to, like, what are all the things we are brought into to bend our own connection to reality structurally, historically, for power to sort of articulate itself, make its biggest impact on us, right?
Can you put it in the context of Palestine and Lebanon and what we're seeing? So specifically, for example, college students.
Yes.
Can you give an example of
Sure.
And how maybe they can handle reality bending?
Yes.
But by the way, they have to read your book first. And then, okay.
Well, first of all, shout out to the students because they're amazing. And as you saw, a lot of the examples in the book are from the student intifada and being invited into spaces with them organizing. The reality bending in relation to Palestine is one that makes us or pulls us into a different plane of conversation and narrative. Like we're arguing somewhere else when like the very basics are, this is a settler colonial regime and it's a Zionist regime overlaid on Palestine from the river to the sea. So a great example, bending away from the slogan from the river to the sea is a version of reality bending because no configuration of reality is going to re-articulate that Palestine is a real place and this is the geographical context of Palestine. That doesn't mean we don't recognize that there's a settler colonial regime that is over top of it. That's what we're fighting, right? Yeah. That's, I think, why, like Stephen Salaita has a beautiful piece called Why We Use the Word Zionist Entity. And that's the argument, is like saying things like that is not us just being, particular or contrarian. It's us renegotiating the pressures put upon us to bend reality. That the Zionist entity is not a natural formation. It's a settler colonial project. And we have to hold on to the fact that settler colonialism can come undone and that indigenous people have the right to fight an occupying regime, period, right? So I think that's part of it. If we put it in the context of the university and students, there's a similar version of that. All the things and all the ways in which they are pressured to back away from the most principled positions that actually are not asking much. They're saying, cash out on your promises as a university. If you say this is a place of free inquiry, then that needs to be applied to everything, and Palestine can't be an exception to that. They go further. They say, if I am going to be involved in the project of learning and being a global citizen, I cannot be engaged in a place that will fund a genocide, while at the same time telling me you're teaching me how to engage as a global citizen of the world that cares about things. They're calling out the reality bending. And that's why I say, like, the students got it going on. They know. What I was tracking was all the ways in which people who are disciplined, whether that's faculty or admin, were trying to pull them, wrench them, that's the word I use, out of their militant positions, using all these ways of like certainly threatening their careers and futures. That's the crude way. But other more subtle ways of like, if you just talk to like this, then maybe people will hear you. Or if you just work with the police, then maybe this will work or you won't get brutalized. First of all, talk about victim blaming.
Yeah.
Second of all, that's another example of reality bending. The entire thing is constructed to make them look like the aggressors. We saw it happen in front of our eyes. The inversion that happened was somehow these students from these campuses were the intruders, and they were the ones making the space unsafe for everybody else, even as we saw police come in, brutalize, or in the case of UCLA, Zionist mobs be allowed to beat the shit out of students with the okay, right? Or at least not interference by the administrations to protect their students. we are meant to think that under those conditions, any other reality could be possible. That's why Walid Daqa is so prominent in this book, political prisoner and revolutionary and martyr now, because he teaches us through his imprisonment and his incarceration, he wrote and talked a lot about how the condition of incarceration made it such that no other possibility. You could be the nicest prisoner you wanted, but like you were still in prison.
Yeah.
And so it's that reality bending away from the condition that you're in, right?
Hearing what you just said and reflecting on him, how do I handle the fact that we are constantly in a world of reality bending? It seems like it's every single second, specifically in our space and the work that we're doing.
Absolutely.
How do we handle that?
Yeah. We name it and constantly are aware of it, because I'm more worried. And some people are just like, that's not enough. Yeah, you're right. I think that's why we organize. That's why we talk to comrades, like you said. That's why we don't do this alone. Because the point of these systems also is to make us feel very small and very alone and atomized. Because connected people can actually disrupt things. And that's the last thing that power wants, is to be disrupted. But it actually is a lot harder to do than just to say, is to remind ourselves that our psyche, our psychological interiority is constantly being attacked. Because the point of reality is just to walk through life being like, I'm just an individual and I'm in charge of my thoughts by myself and I have agency. All those things might be true to a certain degree, but I think to think about spaces as being contested, which includes our mind. One of the things that I talk about in the book is that the violence of these systems, and particularly expansionist projects like Zionism and imperialism and capitalism, can't do their full violence without stealing our mind. It has to include the theft of the psyche. Like, that's a centerpiece. So us even acknowledging it, speaking back to it, saying the things we're feeling or experiencing, while this is not the full story, because each of us has our own histories and vulnerability points and wounds that cause other things to happen or other meaning that we make out of it, is that fundamentally our psyche is a target on purpose. It's not by accident. The handling it every day is also being like, all right, I'm in the mix already. Like, there's no version of this in which I get to exist outside of this machine that's trying to induce something in me, which is really the point of this book, is it's trying to make us believe that a liberated Palestine is not possible. It's trying to make us believe that our commitments to our revolutionary futures and our political projects mean nothing. It's trying to make us believe that they've already won, right? Yep. That's the point. So what we do in these communities of ours is say, they're trying to take us off course. They're trying to confuse us. They're trying to derail us. So go back to like an earlier question of you is like, what does it feel to be like the most feared? Part of that is to be like, okay, I clock what you're trying to do. Busy me with stupid shit, make me afraid, make me silent. All of that has the target of making me forget about our political struggle and the fact that Palestine will be free.
But that doesn't work on you.
No.
So just a bit of a segue back to psychic grammar. And
yes. Yes. So psychic grammar would be like, I've started to think about the ways in which these intrusions.
By the way, is that your term?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be very clear.
Yes,
I knew that already, but I just want to.
Thank you.
A lot of these are your terms.
Yes.
That we're okay.
Yes. Yeah. And when they're not, I give credit and I cite people. But it came about because I realized psychic intrusions also don't happen haphazardly. I was like, oh, there are these like predictable affect states in which it happens. So the phrase psychoaffective comes from Frantz Fanon. And he says this once in his book, Red Shit of the Earth. And I add politico in the middle. So psychopolitical affective, meaning our psyche and the things we feel, affect, are political by nature. And this is what constitutes the psychic grammar. We have a field. I'm just doing it visually because I think it's easier for people. Think about our internal world as being constituted by a field or a terrain of affect, feelings, experiences, things we've taken in, things we have memories of, relationships we hold dear. And then the ways in which psychic intrusions, by way of systems of power, animate this inside of us along well-worn planes that kick into motion in a way that stops us in our tracks. That's the psychic grammar. And I call it a predatory psychic grammar because it's not meant to be like, oh, this is shits and giggles, this is what you do. It's meant to, in that room and the panel that we started off with, it was meant to stop me in my tracks and not be able to say anything. Because of gender, because of fear, because of reality that this guy's aggressive, whatever version is meant to do something, right? And that's the psychic grammar I'm talking about. And the reason why I use grammar is because you can follow grammar. There are certain rules to it. There's a syntax. There's a way in which there's a logic it follows. There's even a coherence, no matter how messed up that is. And there might be contradictions. There's still a coherence. And that's what interested me. I'm just like, oh, if we go back to Bernays, like that's what he was using. He was like, hey, there are predictable ways in which people take in information and make meaning out of it. Let's manipulate that. Yeah. And for me, I'm like, okay, bring it on. Let's despecialize that. Recognize this is happening. Turn it back outwards and recommit to our struggle by knowing that.
Yeah. Going back to, was it psychopolitical?
Affective. Yes.
Plain?
Yes.
Okay. Break that down. For me, it was, okay, politics is a thing. You can't get away from it.
Correct.
Right? That's just
And it's not just voting.
Not just voting, right?
Yes.
Like you can't separate it.
Correct.
Oftentimes people try to separate it. It's
Yes.
impossible.
Yes.
So can you unpack it a little bit?
Sure. So psycho coming from psychological, psyche, right? Our mind. I mean, there isn't a space in which that lives. I think we all think brain when we do that. But like it's a larger set of processes that constitute our psyche, right? Mm-hmm. Our psychological processes and how we take in things and make meaning out of them. I'll go to the affective and then I'll go to the politico. So psychoaffective, that's the piece that comes from Fanon. Affective meaning emotions, feelings. It's much more complex than that because they can be states, they can be contradictory, there can be a lot of things together. So putting those together is saying the psychological and the feeling world work together. When you sandwich those and put politico in it, is saying that's what I mean by the world is saturated by this. And the political is a centerpiece of this. And when I say political, that's why I like make a joke. It's not just voting. Politics is an issue of power. And it's the way that power mobilizes the psychological and the affective towards its stabilization and longevity. Power is never going to give up or cede space by itself. It's interested. Fanon would tell us, for example, colonialism is not a thinking machine. It just is invested in its longevity. It wants to last, right? So, but to do that, it needs to animate something. And that's what I would say, our interiority. It needs not just to animate it, but to rewire it so that we join in the project and help it do its biggest damage, is make us believe that this is the only world that's possible. That's what I mean by psychopolitico-affective.
And this is a good transition to psychic militancy.
Yes.
So unpack that a little bit because people are going to, and maybe it's okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
We can edit this part out. It's okay to fight.
Yes.
There's a violent component. If you go back to Frantz Fanon.
Yes.
Right? Violence is inevitable.
Yes.
Just generally speaking.
Absolutely.
So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Without getting us in trouble.
No. Come on.
We're going to get in trouble anyway.
I mean, maybe by having me here, you're going to get in trouble. No. Yeah. I think some people have worried about me using this, like have even said, why are you using the word militancy? People will shy away from that. They won't. That's not the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the practice, which made me laugh. Like even in the process of me saying psychic militancy and laying out in a very long chapter why we need to be militant psychologically, people are still afraid of using a word that might turn people away.
Yeah.
So we start there, right? To your point of violence is inevitable. I think one of the things why I don't shy away from it is precisely what we've been talking about is if power sees you as disrupting its ability to continue going on being without being challenged, you will be thought of as violent no matter what you do. Like, I have not done a violent thing in the ways in which liberals constitute violence. Let me say that, right?
Yep.
Usually that's like if you hit somebody, if you, damage property, that's when you're violent. In that realm of things, that's not what I've done, but I'm still thought of as violent. And that's what I'm talking about, is the inevitability that Fanon was talking about. He was talking about armed resistance, and people have the right to resist. But he was also saying we need to actually take an oblique angle at this and say, in the eyes of the colonizer, anything you do to disrupt their hold is going to be thought of as violent. That's why the students were immediately received as violent, and then the actual violence came in to suppress them. So that's where I start with militancy, is being cut through this shit. We need to not parse words. We have to be militant. And the reason we have to be militant is because I went into the counterinsurgency manuals and were militants can't be moved. Militants are committed to their cause. Militants understand that comes with risk. Militants know what they're fighting for. Militants are deeply connected to love and revolution and tenderness and a belief in a better world.
Do you see what you're doing? You're providing an alternative definition.
Yes.
Compared to one that we were brainwashed with.
Correct.
Militant is bad. It's ugly. It's violent.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I'm infusing psychic space where there once wasn't some. That's the psychic intrusion.
Yeah.
Is that the second you hear the word militant, you move to a very that's what I mean by the parameters are already set, right? Yep. I don't need to do anything. You just said the word militant, and listeners and everybody else already can conjure an image of what that means and all the associations to it, which is why I say there's nothing neutral. So why are we getting in this thing of thinking any word we say is going to be the right one? If Palestine is in the mix, there is no right word. They want full submission, and they want Palestine to disappear. So I'm interested in precision and saying, no, I actually believe this. I am not being flippant or provocative when I say psychic militancy. I mean it. We need psychic militancy. We need to be unbending. We need to hold the line. We need to understand that in doing that, you are going to feel the crush of violence. It's in that moment where you commit yourself to militancy that every system comes down on you. Because before, let's go back to DEI, it's everybody's welcome here. Come on in. We got room for everybody, right?
Yep.
Until you bring your politics into the mix, until you bring Palestine into the mix.
Politics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I learned coming to the States. I'm people like Lebanese here. Lebanese people really are a thing, which I didn't know because I was in Lebanon until it was a Lebanese person who was committed to Palestine. And then, wow, things closed down really quickly. But that's why we need the militancy, because if we don't have the militancy, it can be a slow creep away from our political convictions and commitments, or it can happen very quickly because all of a sudden you're I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to lose a relationship, or, in some of these counterinsurgency manuals, they literally threaten their life and their family, and even if that's a lie, that's meant to make you feel afraid and do something else. So psychic militancy is the way we remain committed to not bending reality and to understanding that we need psychic fortitude as a counterforce to the repetitive violent ways in which power tries to intrude upon our interior world.
Do you see how powerful your book is? It's not that regular touchy-feely psychologist book.
Oh, I'm glad.
Right, reflection. Get your ass up and fight. Whatever fight means to you, get up and do it. I'm sure you recognize this. This is a completely different kind of book here.
I mean, I'm so appreciative, and honestly, I'm not just saying this. It's humbling to hear that, because it's fire inside of me, fire that I walked through or was made to walk through, but also my true commitment to the world I want to see, in which our peoples are free and have the right to self-determination, that made these words come out onto a book with the urgency. I felt such an urgency and such a responsibility. So to hear it land on you like that is actually really moving to me. And you write a book and you The worst thing to do is write a book and be like, this is what I want it to do. Because like, that's not the way it works. But it feels like a dream to be like, that's the way it landed.
Yeah.
Because that's the fire I feel.
No, I appreciate that. It was an aha book, honestly. It really was a wake-up call. And a great transition here, to be honest with you, is, I mean, you're pissing off your whole profession. Like, you're making everybody mad. And you're going, you're being militant. You're being militant.
You don't say.
Despecializing.
Yes.
You're basically saying, screw this elite status
Correct.
of our occupation. We're going to take it to the streets. We're
Yes.
going to educate folks. Whatever you've been taught, we're going to teach them,
Yes.
and they can use it against you.
Yes.
Now it's going to sort of even the playing field, if you will.
Yes.
Are you ready for all the love you're going to get for this?
I was born ready.
It's very true. Very true.
I mean, here's the thing. I said this at the top of our interview. They lost me.
Yeah.
Very early on.
Thank God you're on our side, by the way.
I mean, I think I would have found my way, but I probably would have muddled around a lot. And I want to be honest about that because the seductions are a lot.
Yeah.
But there were too many things that just didn't align. But that's the thing is like, well, sometimes I think about this and I'm like, they're not invested in their own legacy. Why should we be?
Yeah.
We're always tasked with like stabilizing the legacy of a field. Like somehow I'm just like, psychoanalysis will be fine. Just like every other power structure. They'll be fine, you know, but they're already pissed off at me.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, all right, well.
But the headline for this one is going to be, she's attempting to eliminate the degree.
Yes.
And just, right? That's
of
just
course, the
right.
sensationalist stuff. And,
Right. But what do you mean exactly by despecializing?
Yes. I mean, in many ways, yeah, I do think that one of the things that I'm saying is that all these ways in which knowledge has been sequestered or gatekept is also a project of this.
Right.
And it's one that is a counterinsurgent project, meaning it works to stabilize power, and it's one that keeps certain people out. And those of us who clawed our way in, or as some people in the field have said, were let in only to blow it up from the inside.
And I'm sure they're choosing blow up as a,
Of course. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That we are meant to come in and be gracious and generous that we were just let in, right? So on one way, I'm just like, yeah, we're in here to learn the ropes and be like, everything you have done to us in the history of time, right? We're like, no, enough already.
I don't think people really are going to appreciate what you're doing here. Like, I need to be very clear.
Okay.
You broke into their home, their sanctuary. You took all of their tools.
They opened the door.
You, whatever it was, however you want to label it. They opened. It was open already. You just, the wind blew it open a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
And you are taking everything that they have in their vaults.
Yep.
And you are distributing it to the people.
Correct.
And you're exposing many of your colleagues. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you again, are you ready for...
I am ready. And here's the thing that I'll say is, I'm not the first to do this. I really follow and am humbled to and hope I do justice to the people throughout history who have done this. Frantz Fanon figures prominently here. But there's a huge tradition of liberation psychology that comes from Latin America, right? Ignacio Martín Baró being the primary person who's like trained in theology, liberation theology, and brought it in with psychology and talked about the ways in which we have to be in conversation with regular people and have them be the people who decide their fate and autonomy. There are people on this ground every day in Palestine, every day in Lebanon, every day in Kashmir, every day incarcerated people and political prisoners are doing this work. So it's not just me. And they figure in this book, they're like, every revolutionary that has like been like, psychology is the centerpiece of this. And here's how you do this. Now, what I did do is say, okay, I'm going to turn this on its head. If Edward Bernays can do it in this direction, we need to be doing it in this direction. And so really what I mean by despecialize is wrench these concepts from the hands of the architects that meant to use it in one way to oppress people and keep them in their place, as Fanon would tell us, and say, folks, if this is happening, and if I have anything to contribute, is to be like, here's what I've learned over the years. Let's use it because it is happening.
Right.
And that's the despecialization. I don't believe in an elitist model in which this knowledge hides behind closed doors. Here's the real reason why. Not because it's the elitist and Eurocentric people who are holding it. It's because all of this knowledge was built on the backs of our people in the global south. Everything in the field of psychology is from the plunder of the global south. It's our knowledge. We're not coming in and being like, hey, teach me. I'm realizing, oh, this is our shit. These are our minds. A lot of the times you're talking about MK Ultra, it's literally our bodies, Black folks being injected with truth serum, quote unquote, experiments on Black, brown, indigenous people for the field of psychology. That's us taking stuff back and being like, this knowledge is not a Eurocentric import. It was theft.
Yeah.
And here's us re-articulating it into a project of our liberation. Why would we leave it for them?
That's powerful. That's powerful. I appreciate the humility at the beginning of the part of what you just said, but those individuals, Frantz Fanon, didn't have social media, didn't have internet.
Yeah.
Didn't have high-speed internet, right?
Yes.
Didn't have Substack.
Yeah.
This is a different game. This is a different level. I really want the audience to understand you're bringing a whole other level of awareness. I think that this book is something that should be taught to students immediately. And I was going to ask you if you're going to have some sort of teaching manual or manual that people could pair with it to actually practice, affirmations or whatever it may be.
Thank you. I hadn't thought about that, and I think maybe I veer away from that because what I don't want it to be is become a prescription that can just be repeated, right? There's a meaning making that has to be specific to every locale, that has to do justice to the space and the place. The biggest thing I would love to do is for us to be like, there's a portable logic at least. How this looks like in every place is going to be different. But the portable logic is one that is a truth, that our psyche is contested space.
Right.
And that psychic militancy is something we can practice. That's part of what I say in the book is I can't, just by virtue of writing a book, you can't represent everything, right? And this can't be comprehensive. I focus a lot on Palestine. I focus on other things too, but I focus a lot on Palestine because of the state of the world, but also where my heart lives, right? But I also end with the postscript is about ICE raids. Because for me, these things are intimately connected. And that's what I mean by portable logic, that anybody reading this can hopefully see themselves in it, can say, this is the fight. This is what's being done to my mind. These are the ways in which we can read this. This is my commitment to telling the truth. And let me apply it in this way, right? But I hope that I'll get the chance to meet people in real life and meet with communities. I was in California last week for visiting schools and talking to people about psychic militancy, and students are right on.
Yeah.
They're great.
We have to learn from them.
Yes.
Right? The one thing I don't want to miss is reskilling. What does that really mean in practice?
Yes. Yeah. So reskilling ourselves, psychic militancy, this helps me go back a little bit into psychic militancy, is a political project. It's not just a psychological project. And I say just because I think sometimes that can slip into behaviorism, right? Of if I just do this cognitive behavioral thing, I will do psychic militancy. No, it's a daily political project that affirms the reality of the world we live in and what oppression looks like, and a commitment to not bending ourselves in service of colonialism, capitalism, empire, right? Reskilling ourselves is the ways we build almost I talk about it as stamina. It's a ritual because violence is ritualistic, right? It repeats itself. This is one of the things that I think my colleagues are going to be very happy about. A mainstay of psychoanalysis is the compulsion to repeat, which means we repeat the things that we are, loosely speaking, I'm saying, traumatized by, and we do it in sort of action because it's hard to hold on to or it's traumatizing to think about it or something like that. And what I say in the book is we need to take that and make it ours. The compulsion to repeat needs to be ours. And reskilling ourselves means repeating every day. That's maybe where affirmations come in. It's an easier word than the compulsion to repeat,
Right.
right? Is to commit ourselves to the daily political practice of political consciousness that tells us that bending, conceding, right? I say we cede no psychic space. That repetition is how we reskill ourselves to be able to come up against these forces you were just talking about before, especially for those of us who are connected to struggles, political struggles, right? Most of the people I talk to in the book, if you see it, like I'm not talking to liberals. I'm talking to people who are intimately in struggle. And if they're struggling, that was my clue. I was like, wow, like this is why we need to be doing this, because those are the folks that are struggling.
Yeah.
Right?
I could have asked this at the beginning. I decided not to because I wanted to ask you towards the end. Why now? Why put this book out there right now? Trump's in office, unless you just want to piss more people off, or whatever it is. But why now?
Yeah. I think the things you listed are urgent. There's a global rise of fascism. There's a reconfiguration of the world as we see it in front of us. I think I hear a lot of people falling into despair, right? That's what I call commodified despair. Like there's something being mobilized inside of us to stop us in our tracks and think there's nothing else that can be done. Even as we see every single day things being done, like people protecting their neighbors against ICE raids, in the face of everything telling us nothing can be done and this state is so powerful, and it is ferocious and mean and cruel. There's still people sacrificing themselves and being murdered in full daylight, right? Now, it calls into question what we're willing to sacrifice and what risks we're taking to do this. But I think that's why it's so urgent. When I talk about fire inside of me, that lives inside of me, that drives me, it's not just a destructive fire. I think people get scared, especially people in my field. They're just like, ooh, fire, that sears. But that's back to Walid Daqa. It's like fire can sear, and fire can also be harnessed to, reconfigure a terrain so that the things that were there can flourish in the way that it's meant to. And I think that's why now, like, I would feel so deeply irresponsible if I amassed this knowledge over the course of 15 years and more, and then just like sat on it.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm deeply appreciative and feel so lucky to be brought into conversations with people who are in the streets, in the context of the settler colony of the United States and all over the world, whether it's in Palestine or Lebanon or India or France or the UK. Like, I'm so lucky, or South Africa, to have comrades everywhere who are like fighting this fight. So I'm just like, if there's anything I can offer, right, other than my body on the line, that I hope this is one small thing,
when I was reading the book, I just wanted to say this to you. Maybe I read this wrong, but I felt like you were writing to yourself as a reminder.
Yes.
Is that fair?
That's a beautiful way of saying it. Yeah, I think it is. Just like the opening scene where I wrote to myself as a reminder. Just like in my examples, when I talk about psychic militancy, I bring up Malcolm X, and I bring up Walid Daqa, and I bring up Ghassan Kanafani, and I bring up Assata Shakur, all our revolutionaries, George Jackson. All of them also wrote to themselves, Mumia Abu Jamal, to remind themselves, like they taught us what it is like to keep repeating to ourselves. It's just as important to us as it is to disrupting. Because if we are recognizing that it's our interiority that's being intruded upon, then I need to keep reminding myself. It also was a practice of repetition. The book repeats things as an in vivo exercise together of how much we have to keep doing this, and that there's no shame in this political practice. I mean, I sat with this book for months upon months, years really. And that was the daily political practice of like, yeah, gotta keep repeating this, right? They haven't won.
They're not going to win.
No.
So if I am just someone who just picks up the book, when is it coming out, just for the audience?
May 20th, 2026. And it's available for pre-order already.
How do I frame this question? If I am a white MAGA, whatever it is, conservative, and I pick up your book, what is your expectation from me? I'm just thinking about the other side now. What is the expectation of me reading this book? What's the result?
Maybe it's not for you.
Mm.
And that's okay. I think we get lost in like we have to reach the other side. I think that's one of the ways in which we get derailed. I'm not saying that there isn't a space for that. I'm just saying, must that be our goal? I'm interested in talking to comrades, right? A generous reading of this would be, you'd pick up this book and you know what? No, I don't really have a generous reading of it. Yeah. I really don't, because it's so misaligned. It's constitutively misaligned.
Let me play the other side of this.
Yes.
I actually think it would be awakening for that individual.
Huh.
I look at it completely different because we are changing minds. We are changing hearts. You see individuals across the board who were inherently against Palestine that are now with, right? I view it as, well, there's two ways to view it. If you really want to have fun with it, like, oh shit, they're onto us. We're in trouble.
Yes.
She caught us. Or, okay, maybe I'm being brainwashed. Maybe, right, society has been brainwashing me. Maybe the White House has been brainwashing me, whatever it is.
Sure.
I think it's a bit of a wake-up call.
It could be. I guess maybe where I hesitate here is that to bring us back to, I don't think you're doing this. I don't think it's an over-focus on that over our people. That's not what I think at all. It's an invitation for us to be like, there is a space in which we can take a side. And that's not a reflection on us giving up on people. Maybe because you led with MAGA, right?
On purpose.
Yeah, on purpose. But when I hear that, we have to recognize that that is a fascistic ideology. Just like we have to recognize that Zionism is an ethnocentric eliminationist ideology. I don't think there's curing those things.
See what you're doing there? And you're waking me up again is, hey, maybe we can change minds. Bullshit, militancy.
Yes.
Call it, I mean, brilliant. Yep.
And here's why. Because we get lost in our ability to cure rather than to dismantle. That I am not calling for the elimination of somebody who was once a Zionist or once MAGA, right? Let's be clear on that. Let's be clear. What I'm saying is that in focusing on them as like an individual that I want to reach, we're missing the violent structure and ideology to which they are wed. They must be the ones to divest from that ideology. Zionists have to divest from Zionism and say the call to dismantle Zionism is an ethical call because there's no movement from Zionism being an eliminationist, genocidal, expansionist project. There's no half-assing Zionism, which we've seen now. Like, it's out in the open. We've said this all along, but it's out in the open. So that's, I think, why you hear my hesitation. It's like, oh, here's how we practice psychic militancy.
Well, you could have just told me, shut up, that's BS.
No.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, like, we got to keep it real.
It's so great. And I really am so happy this happened because these systems rely on our hearts, which are committed to a fair world. That's how it gets in. And then we end up feeling like, oh, but we're leaving somebody behind. But we should pay attention to that. When we're really actually not saying that's what we're doing. Yeah. We're just saying, no, you're a fascist. And it's okay to take a position against fascism. Right. It's all right. And if anything else, to say the responsibility is on you as a fascist to stand down from your fascism and join us, not the other way around. It's not us coming closer to you. It's saying that's fucked up. Being a fascist is fucked up. Being a Zionist is fucked up. Join us. Right?
Yeah.
Not bend the other way. We don't cede space. They cede space.
I want to reiterate, though, how do we continuously remind ourselves to take that approach?
Yes.
Because you see, I read your book, I'm in it, and then I'm like, oh, I feel bad. Maybe they'll learn.
Fair.
But, yeah. So
we do this.
Yeah.
We do this. We repeat. We're going to do this over and over and over again. If you saw, even I was just like, am I missing something here? And then I stopped myself and I was like, no, I'm actually not. I'm really not. This is the position, right?
Some intrusion was going on.
Yes,
there.
and practicing and like
Yeah.
maybe like social, like, oh shit, this is the way it plays on. And there's nothing like nefarious about it. There was nothing bad about what just happened. We have a relationship. There's a social process happening. That's my point.
Right.
Is like, this is the way it hides. Where like seemingly innocent things can happen from good places, from a good faith place.
Right.
And like, there was a split second in which I could have joined, and maybe that's complicated by a lot of things. So like, what will people think? Or how will I look like if like I'm saying like, fuck the fascists? And then it's just like, no, that is the position. That is the position we need to take to be psychically militant. And that is okay. What Malcolm X says is, don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah. I've been wanting to ask you this.
Yes.
It's along the same lines.
Okay.
Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, right?
They're not our friends.
They're not our friends.
They're not our friends.
Okay.
They're
Are they part of the reality bending?
Yes.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. There is no fight for the liberation of Palestine without the fight for every other liberation. Just because they're giving us crumbs now, right? Great. Fantastic. You had your own little coming into, I don't know, for Candace Owens, coming to Jesus, right? Fantastic. But how does that help our fight for everything else? She remains deeply committed to the death of a large swath of people by being an American first, by believing in American exceptionalism, American imperialism. And then Tucker Carlson was just at the White House the other day. Like, this is a show for them. I don't care how well-versed in the reality of Palestine. That should be the easiest thing for people. Like, I'm not giving cookies to people for being like genocide bad, especially if you're Catholic and you believe in the right of life, right? For me, I'm just like, cool, you're coherent and you're, okay, next, who else do you want to die?
But what's our infatuation with these individuals?
You know, I think it's a long history. I learned this coming to the United States, that being racialized in the United States as an Arab American is a whole different ballgame. I mean, I came here and the casual anti-Palestinian and anti-Arab racism was shocking to me. I was like, oh my God. Like, I saw it on movies, but like just everyday parlance and stuff. I do think that's part of it, is this like, oh my gosh, people are waking up. They now know. I get that. That's fair. It's like being thirsty for the things that we've always known to be true, and now we see it. The side of it that I would say is that is always a trap, because does it actually disrupt the system that created that racism to begin with? Candace Owens doesn't do that. I think we also need to move beyond the time of crumbs. Yeah. We don't need to be like thanking them for seeing us and calling it genocide. I want to be like, you helped this happen. You helped this happen. You know?
Yeah.
Are you going to divest from the machinery of American cruelty and arms race? I haven't seen that happen yet. That's being militant. It's like, it's okay for us to ask that.
Well, the reason I brought up Candace Owens, she's one of the top 5 most requested guests on this podcast. Of course, I'm not going to say yes to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just fascinates me that our audience is asking for it.
Yes, because I think we're starved. But that's, I think, what I would say to people is, why are we selling ourselves so short? Like, that's what we get.
Yep.
That's what we deserve.
We deserve much more.
So much more.
So I will wrap up with this. Anything you want to say about the book that I missed? I feel like when other people get interviewed about the book, the authors don't really get to say everything they want to say. So is there anything that we missed or that I missed that you want to cover? You
were awesome. This is great.
I appreciate that. I'll give you the $50 after for saying that. That's niceness.
No, I really do appreciate how engaged you were in it. And it really felt like it came alive even for me. Like, there's a process of writing the book, and then the book goes out into the world, and it's kind of terrifying actually to land somewhere. It's very vulnerable. So you engaging it in this way, in this meaningful way, it was really special. And so I just say, thanks folks for reading it and like engaging with it. And I hope you take it to the places it needs to be taken. And like, it's not mine anymore.
It's definitely not going to be yours anymore. Yeah. It's going to be out there. Where can we follow you? Where can we support you?
Yes.
If we would like to seek your assistance,
Yes.
On a therapeutic level, for example,
Yeah.
how would we reach out to you?
Yes. So I have a website, larasheehi.com, and there are ways to get in contact with me there. I've just also launched a podcast called Psychic Militancy.
Yeah.
That's where you can find, so we can.
Amazing podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to have a follow-up, email. Hey, when are you going to be on the podcast?
I will have a whole other podcast about the podcast,
Thank
podcast,
you.
and why you're doing it, because it is brilliant.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it is a practice of a public-facing conversation of how we do the things we were talking about, like talking to people who are already doing this in their way, and maybe in ways that people don't recognize that's what they're doing, even themselves. But you can subscribe to that. It's on YouTube and every other place on audio as well that you get your podcasts.
When does it drop? Every week, every month,
We haven't regularized that yet.
Okay.
So excuse me on that end. But but we also do live streams. So it's not just pre-recorded. We're going to have a live stream in the next week, I think, about Lebanon and what's happening in Lebanon. So I'm really trying to also get at, real life events that are happening in the moment. We had a wonderful live stream with Giomar and Alex Avinia about Venezuela. So there's a lot that is coming down the bend. We're on Instagram as well, Psychic Militancy Pod. And then my personal Instagram is Psychoanalyst Activist.
Amazing. Thank you. So we do this new thing where we let the guests look into the camera.
Yes.
And we had Chris Smalls on. He did a short rap. We had Rashida, and she gave a message to the youth as Auntie Rashida.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, whatever you like to say, no pressure. You can take your time.
Okay.
If you want, if you don't want to do it, that's fine too. You know what? No, you have to do it. I'm being militant here. We need to hear from you. We need to hear from you. So what message do you want to send to the youth, to your colleagues, to the people that you're actually going to, piss off maybe? Whatever you want to do.
I'm not going to talk to the people that I'm going to piss off. I'm going to talk to the comrades out there. And just as a reminder that our histories haven't been written yet, commit to the fight, commit to militancy, and not only Palestine will be free, but we'll all be free.
You're missing the F word. Come on. You got to fit that in there. No, thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Listen, stay tuned, cause it's time for Sumud.